Welcome to the UniLife podcast, where we talk about university and university life. Today, our topic is going to be about what the social scene is like at different universities. Joining us today is Mark and Trevor. So why don't you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. My name's Mark. I went to Western. I started there in 2012 and graduated in 2016. Seems like a long time ago, but certainly years that I missed. I majored in political science for my first 2 years, so as part of the social science faculty, and then majored in business the following 2 years at the Ivy Business School. I was in Delaware for my residence in first year, so happy to answer any questions there. But overall, had an awesome time at Western and would recommend the social scene there to anyone.
Hey guys, my name is Trevor. I am currently third year in McMaster for Biomedical and Electrical Engineering. So I started back in 2019. I'm expected to graduate in 2024. It's a 5-year program. My residence was Peter George. It's brand new. So I guess even if you know the layout of McMaster, you probably wouldn't know that by now. Yeah, so far it's been a great 3 years, and hopefully another great 2 to come.
So when you guys were either in university or currently still in university, where were the go-to places to hang out with your friends, whether it be off campus or on campus?
So, it really depends what year you're in. I think in first year, certainly the big part of your life is residence and the floor you're on. So you spend a ton of time bonding with your floor mates and then, getting to know other people in your residence. Again, for me, that was Delaware. I think when you're sort of having fun beyond the residence, and by this I mean like still being productive with your time, you're spending a lot of your social life in gyms or clubs. There's a student pub at Western called The Spoke, where a lot of people like to congregate just socially. Granted, you need to be of age by the time it's like 9 p.m. and drinks start getting served, but still fun to be there even before the alcohol starts flowing. And then studying, I feel like Trevor can answer this better. He's probably a more focused individual. So why don't I just stop at the having fun in residence part?
Yeah, so first year for me, definitely a lot of studying. Me and my friends, we'd like a lot of times we found down to the library. It's either like the health science library, the engineering library. But on our off time, we like to just a lot of times we'd spend time together in like common rooms and places like that. So still close to res, still on campus. We'd be playing like ping pong or like foosball or things like that. Yeah, we also had an on-campus pub called the Phoenix, but yeah, none of us actually I think we went in there to get like lunch once, and then like we just knew we wouldn't be able to get in after like a certain hour. But yeah, I'd say most of the social scene for me at least was on campus first year. I don't think I took the bus once or walked outside of the campus grounds.
So it really sounds like all the fun in first year happens actually on campus in residence. Interesting.
It's hard to go anywhere else, Marcus, just because I was 17 when I entered Western, so wasn't legally allowed to go anywhere. And if you're fortunate enough to know students off campus, you had friends who were older, then maybe you could sneak yourself into a house party or get tipped off of some event that was going on. But for the most part, you're really just sort of locked in residence, and it's not a bad thing. It's a great way. Some of my lifelong friends were on my floor in first year and in my residence, so it's a great way to sort of get your social footing at university.
Well, probably expanding more on what it's like being in first year. What did your schools facilitate any social events? Like, I know there's Frosh Week, so maybe you guys can speak upon that.
Yeah, I think, in first year in particular, you really rely on the school to be active in your social life. So I'd say for the big weeks like Frosh Week and Frost Week, just sort of Frosh Week in second semester, the school is really involved and they do a great job at Western of putting on social events that anyone can attend. And it's a ton of fun. You meet, a million new faces. And look, they're great parties, and I can't recommend them enough. So my advice saying first year, definitely, pay close attention to those events that are sponsored by the school and show up. Thereafter, I think the school sort of leaves it to the individual to carve their own path in terms of what they want to do socially. So Western, I'd sort of say takes a step back, and that's where you really lean on again, like your residence mates and your floor mates, as well as the clubs you're associated with and any extracurriculars you're doing. Intramurals was a big part actually of like making friends at Western. So co-ed soccer teams or whatever it was, lots of fun, and just another avenue to meet new people and make friends.
Sure. Yeah, I'd say definitely like we call it O week, like it's orientation week. It's like the first week everyone comes in. It was like a big thing, they had like a big concert. They had Bryce Vine show up at the end. One thing, I would say, like I agree with what Mark said, but one thing I'd say is like kind of take the things you learn in that first week, like just meeting people, like just like literally random people. You can just like walk up to them like, oh, you're at the concert, you're beside them, you just introduce yourself. I'd say that's something people could take forwards after that first week. It's kind of just that openness, the idea of like, oh, you have like, oh, sure, you found these friends in your res or in your program. It's great and it's comfortable just to be with them, hang out with them all the time, or even like the high school friends that you came with. But I think taking forward that openness and the idea of just always meeting new people can really open up different doors come like in the later years.
Yeah, I totally agree, Trevor. Like, what a good point. Like, in Frost Week, you can literally walk up to anyone and just say, "Hey, I'm Mark. How's it going? Can I get your number?" And you've made a new friend, and that's like that goes on all week. And by the end, you have like a million numbers in your phone, and you can't put a face to the name. That same openness continues. Like, what's different about university is people are willing to meet you. There's no sort of close borders or boundaries. Like, if you're willing to be social and you're a friendly face, like people are willing to entertain that and make new friends. So there's a certain level of shyness that you need to get over in university, but it pays huge dividends. And just, again, just having a Rolodex that spans across faculties, across residences, all of a sudden you have 100 new friends that you did in a week ago.
So you talk about this openness mentality where you can just go up to anybody doing Frosh Week, say, hi, I'm Marcus, Mark, what's your number? But do you think you can carry that same mentality like in your second, third, or fourth, or even fifth year?
You want to take that one, Trevor?
Yeah, I definitely say, I think that as time goes on, it definitely gets more difficult. Not to say that you can't do it or there's anything preventing you, but I think a big thing that would stop people from being like that is you've kind of already established these cliques, these groups, and I think some people, myself included, find that intimidating. So if I know like, oh, this person is like a part of this larger group, like, am I as open to just like, if I'm not forced to like interact with them, like if I'm not in a group with them, am I willing just to like, oh, like go up to them and be like, oh, like, what are you doing? Like so and so, and like oh, let's do this or let's do that. I'm not as inclined to, I'd say, but it's definitely something I'm working on, and something I think everyone should continuously continuously work on like that part of themselves, because I really see no downside to being open.
Yeah, what I found, Trevor, was like, come third or fourth year, to your point, you have your established friends. Like, people aren't as curious to go out and find a million new friends because, look, they've already got, 15, 20 close friends, and do they really need more? And the answer is yes. Like, people, again, are willing. It's just, it's not as much of a priority versus Frosh Week when, everyone's on the same level playing field and they're just trying to meet new people. That said, like one thing I found was the relationships I made in Frost Week, while I wasn't like, necessarily great friends with the engineers, I had maybe one friend who was an engineer that if the engineers were having a big party, I'd reach out to him and be like, Tom, let's go to that party. Like, can you bring me along? And then you sort of have your way in and you can meet the other engineers. So it just goes back to how important those first weeks are, or even first year are in or is in establishing friends and sort of getting your social circle together, social circle.
So actually, while we're on the topic of social circles, is at your university, and I think Trevor, you can take the lead on this. Is there social interaction between different departments and faculties? Is it true that the engineering kids like to stick with only engineering kids, or is that a myth?
So I would say there does lie some truth to it. I do know people who mainly have they have most of their friends who are also engineers. Maybe it's by coincidence or maybe it's by choice. But like for me, for example, after residence, I moved out into a student house with just three of like my really close friends, none of which were in engineering. And I think I personally did that. I would say partly intentionally because it was a way for me to just kind of escape work. Because when I'm always with my engineering friends, it's always like kind of in the back of our heads that like, oh, like this next thing's coming up, like, oh, we got to do this. So it was a way for me to kind of just take a step back from work and have a place to separate like working and like just in like enjoying my time like with my friends. But no, I'd say it's definitely up to the individual whether or not they want to like yeah whether or not they want to expand.
Yeah, that's a common theme. My little sister Trevor, she's in Western in medical sciences, and all of her housemates are not in med sci. Basically, to your point, to escape work and make sure she has some variety in her life, and it's not all about the next assignment or the next test. I think in my experience at Western, like people interacted cross faculties. And if you weren't in engineering, doesn't mean you aren't allowed to hang out with the engineers, but there were certain faculties that had more social events and like experiences put on by the faculty of the school. So like I know some faculties had like proms or semis similar to high school that I didn't end up going to because I wasn't part of those faculties, but something I was pretty envious of as a social sci major that I can participate in something similar.
Well, I think one of the other great ways of meeting people from different faculties is student clubs and organizations. So, I mean, what was that like for you guys? What was your university's student clubs and organizations like?
So there's hundreds, if not thousands, of clubs at Western, or over 1,000 clubs. So there's a ton of opportunity to join one. I think it's really up to the individual in terms of what they're interested in, though I caveat that with one piece of advice from my own experience. I basically just walked around club fair day or clubs day at Western. It goes on for a week or 2 weeks, and there's a bunch of booths or hundreds of booths. And I basically just go up to the people at the booth and say, what are you all about? What does social gatherings look like? Are there parties? Do you have any VP positions open that I can run for? These are the sort of strategic questions I was using to suss out like what actually went on. And for some, honestly, like I didn't have a ton of interest beyond the fact that they seemed like a really tight-knit group that loved to put on events and get together. And for me, that was enough, again, to just have another social channel I could lean on.
Yeah, for sure. I would definitely say it is important to diversify your how do I say this? That diversify how you have your social interaction. So it's just not coming from one source. So whether that being like, oh, your high school friends, or whether that being your faculty. Yeah, in first year, I remember I only joined a few clubs, but funny enough, they all related to engineering. So it was partly just to spruce up the resume. But I guess that also comes with the downside. Yeah, like that means I'm only interacting. Not to say that being in a faculty defines a person as to who they are, but it definitely brings a certain point of view that you don't get from different faculties, like where you get like a variety of different perspectives. But yeah, definitely joining clubs and things like that is a great way to meet new people and have different types of social interactions. For example, like this year, I'm part of the rowing team at Master now, so that's very that was a very different experience from the other clubs and the other teams I've joined. Just kind of the mindset of like, oh, like being part of something bigger than yourself, and I don't know, just like the lifestyle that they kind of live is like the whole like you wake up at 5 a.m. grind, you like then you have to go to school, go to second practice, and then go to bed. It's like it's like a different type of social interaction, I'd say, than other clubs. But I say it's that variety, it's that balance that I have, that really keeps everything in track.
So I'm actually really glad you mentioned about that whole lifestyle, about waking up at 5, going to practice and studying, sleeping. So what are some of the pitfalls of university social life and maintaining good academics?
So, obviously, university is filled with distractions and we'll call them enticing opportunities. So, honestly, the biggest pitfalls I saw in first year as you sort of adjust to this new norm is one, showing up to class, and two, studying at night. People, and they sort of go hand in hand. For the nights that you're not studying and you're having fun and you're staying up late, that makes showing up to class the next morning, particularly if you've got like a brutal 8 a.m. or something, pretty difficult. The second you stop showing up to class is the second you start falling behind. So that would certainly be one piece of advice. Show up to class. I don't care how late you're up, just get there and listen at a minimum, because important things happen in class, and profs certainly give hints as to what will be on the exam, or things to look out for in your studies that you won't get if you're just sitting at home. And then second is studying at night. Pick the days you want to go out, I'd say, and stay up late. But certainly don't do it every night, because there are people that do that and they don't show up in second year or third year. They're sort of seen in first year and that's the last of them. So it's important to stay vigilant, and I'm sure Trevor, given his background, has even better advice.
Yeah, I definitely say I totally agree with that statement. How university is filled with all these distractions, especially if you move. I'm not sure where you are from, Mark, but if you're not from London, that must have meant you left home to go to school, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, especially moving out on your own, you get this kind of like freedom for the first time, where it's like, oh, you can do whatever you want. You stay up however late you want. Like there's nothing really binding you to like any set of rules anymore. And I think, yeah, some people take that a little too far. Some people go a little crazy with that first year. But that's where you kind of have to figure out like what works for you academically and socially, because like once again, it's all about the balance. Another piece of advice I'd give is don't stretch yourself too thin. Like you only have so many hours in the day, right? Like you sleep for like a certain amount, then you gotta like study for a certain amount. You eat, all the stuff. And I think yeah, in first year at the very beginning, I joined a few too many clubs, I'd say. And then, yeah, my time was spread just a little too thin. And then I had to end up dropping these clubs, this and that. But definitely recognize, recognize the time you have. And just like Mark said, pick the days that you're going to just stay up late, and then try to stick to those as best you can. And then I think that's the key, is just finding a schedule and finding what works for you.
The hardest part, Marcus, is you've committed to a studying night, you're studying, and then someone barges in the room and is like, there's this huge party going down tonight on the second floor, you have to come. And that's where like really being diligent, sticking to your goals, comes in handy, obviously. And then another, for the first year's piece of advice, is just tread carefully in your first semester. People after frosh week just keep going as the frosh week is, months long when it's not. And those first round of exams come, mid-October. And that's where you can see some really bad marks. It's typically a huge wake-up call for people. So, go lights out during your frosh week, but in October, just know the marks are coming and they're very real.
Yeah, I'd say that for sure too. Yeah, one part you kind of mentioned, I'd say is like, yeah, you also want to be aware that not everyone has the same goals as you academically. So that means they're not going to be like having the same schedule aligned as that you have set out. It's funny, like I just met somebody and I was like, man, like when do they have time to study? Like they're always out, they're always doing this, they're always asking me to come out. But then someone else, a friend of a friend, had told me that like they actually failed like first semester and like they're still in school for whatever reason, second semester. They're just taking the courses for whatever reason. And like they're still going out. So I mean, like I'd say tread carefully who you're sticking around, because I can definitely see people like them like dragging people down, like taking them in like the sinking ship.
For sure. You just got to come up with a plan that works for you and stick with it, because the distractions are unlimited. You'll always want to go to another party. You'll always want to attend this club event or that club event. And it gets tricky, but trust me, it's no fun. It's no fun getting kicked out of school or getting bad marks, despite however many parties you went to make up for it.
Sounds like you need to have your priorities straight and a good balance between social life and time to study, as well as good discipline to resist the enticements of the parties on the second floor, things like that.
For
Anyways,
sure.
so for the last question, so what is your favorite social day in the university and what is it and why?
So for me, it was definitely either homecoming or St. Patty's. There's a ton of hype and excitement around them. Everyone wants to have a good time, and that's when all the parties start. So if you're a first year, you can't go to the bars. Like there will be innumerable house parties available that anyone's welcome to, and the fun starts early. I remember homecoming, like hitting the streets at 9 a.m. to start, finding friends and go out and have a good time. And it's a long day, but a ton of fun. And it only comes around once a year. A lot of people say they like the homecoming better than Christmas for the holidays. So it's an important time of the year. And I had a ton of fun doing it.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot of kids would say that. Well, I mean, lately I'm not sure. Like with the whole COVID thing, it was canceled
Fair
all
enough.
across last year, but this year is like slowly coming back. But and so I've only really experienced like the full set of events kind of once around my first year. But it's weird. I probably would have said the same thing, except for this year. So we had the huge rowing competition come up the exact same day as McMaster's homecoming. And so,
Shoot.
yeah, basically I had to miss the whole day. I had to get up at like 4, and then we took a bus down to Peterborough for like the race. And I thought, I was like, oh, like I'm just gonna miss out the entire time. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna check my phone. Like people are just gonna be sending me all these things, and I'm just gonna feel like I FOMO the entire time. But as the day went on, I kind of realized maybe I'm not missing out all that much. Like I'd rather be there than be at this race with like, I don't know, like all my friends, like all my teammates, like that we all prepared with like the entire year, whatnot. But yeah, I'd say maybe that's coming kind of warming up to me, that like that first big race in Peterborough. I'd say for me this year for sure is one of like my top social event. It's just because you're surrounded by very like-minded people, not only from your school, but from like schools all across Canada. So I think that was definitely a time for me.
And just shows the value of like how clubs and teams can really impact like your day to day and what you find fun and who you want to hang out with.
For sure.
Anyways, guys, thank you for coming on the podcast. It was a pleasure to have you. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And you can tune in for more episodes to learn everything about university life and university, as well as you can follow us on Instagram at unilife.ja. And there will be some merch dropping soon, so stay tuned for that.